Hey guys, welcome back to the Babbling Boots YouTube channel where we
babble about boots.
But not today. We're not babbling about boots today. We're actually babbling about these things, shoe trees. So these come in pairs and they go inside of your shoes, of course, or boots in this case. They're really meant for one of two reasons. First, to keep the shape, the form of your shoe and to prevent any kind of creases in the leather. And the second being to absorb moisture, which is really helpful if you tend to sweat after wearing your shoes. You definitely don't want that messing up your nice leather boots in our cases. The third reason, and one that's not advertised, and what I use my shoe trees for, is actually because my shoes are a little bit tight for me. If you watch my Meerman's video, you know what I'm talking about. So I use these to expand the areas that I find a bit tight. So in my case, I just slide them, and I slide them actually all the way down. Because for me, it's kind of around the ball of the foot and kind of the toes where it gets a little bit tight. So in this case, as you can see, the shoe tree here is all the way to the very top, so it expands this area that I had trouble with. How about you?
Using mine a little bit differently. My Vibergs already fit me pretty well. They're not tight at all. So my most concern is making sure that they don't crease too much or try to minimize the creasing as much as possible. And then also to keep moisture wicked away out of them. So with my shoe trees, and I don't know that other people do this, but I found it works for me. I don't slide mine all the way into the shoe tree, like all the way to the bottom like these are. Mm-hmm. I just kind of push them in and then rest them to where they kind of come naturally to a stop. So that way they basically fill the toe box here and the vamp, so you can press down on these right here. Their structure and the sides are pretty structured. So it keeps creases to a minimum, and it's also far enough in there to where it's wicking away any moisture or sweat you have in there. But it's not stretching your boots out or widening them. Or if I push this all the way down in the boot, it's going to kind of stretch it out just a little bit. Obviously it's not going to stretch it out a lot because that's not what shoe trees are meant for. But it will stretch it just a little bit more than I would want it to be stretched. Mm-hmm. So that's why I just kind of rest them both here. In my Vibergs at least. I have other boots that are a little bit tighter that I want to stretch out some of my Meermans. My Chelsea boots are kind of similar to hers, where I do press them all the way in there just because I want them stretched out a little bit. But overall, if my boots are already fitting me the way I want them to fit, I try not to have the shoe trees disturb the fit of them too much.
Gotcha, so we actually use ours for totally different reasons then. I noticed when you were pulling yours out that mine is Woodlore in brand and yours was something that starts with an S, I think?
Stratton.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Is there any difference between these two brands, Woodlore and Stratton?
Well, between these two shoe trees, there's a little bit of difference. I mean, this one's kind of a split toe, which I think is probably more customizable to the fit of your boot. So these are probably a little bit more expensive than these Strattons, which it's solid toe. It's pretty standard.
These also look a little bit wider too. I don't know if this could even fit in my Chelsea.
If you look here, this is definitely wider. They're both medium though, just different brands, so that's kind of interesting. But if you're trying to fit these into a narrower boot and you don't want them too stretched out, then this is a better fit for sure. Just in the toe box, it's not as wide. But if you have like a really small foot that's wider, this will fit it. I
don't think anyone has a shape.
Some people probably they're going to be offended that you said that.
Well, I'm really sorry if your foot looks like this. Okay, I'm really, really sorry.
But if you're, some people probably do have short and wider feet, and so that is accommodating for someone that has a shorter and wider foot, to stretch it out. Whereas this medium one from Stratton, it doesn't stretch out when you go down. So this one actually, I think, gets a little bit wider the lower you go down than this one is. So I think this is just more of a not custom, but it's more dynamic for the size of the foot, whereas this one's pretty standard. So this one probably costs a little bit more, but I would say it's also a little higher quality.
Where did you get these, by the way?
I got these on Amazon a few years ago. And,
do you remember the price?
No, these are actually, for cedar shoe trees, I think they're some of the cheaper ones I could find. I wasn't trying to get really expensive ones. They can get pretty expensive, but I think I got these in like a set of like 2 or 3. It's cheaper if you buy them with like 2 or 3 sets. But
we'll try to put a link down below if we can find it on Amazon again.
Yep. So as far as wooden shoe trees, I don't know if they make them that are not cedar. Cedar is really the only type of wood that I know shoe trees are made with, and I think that's partially because it's a very fragrant wood if you smell it. And when you initially buy them, the smell of the cedar will like fill a room, and it smells great. Over time, though, that smell kind of fades a little bit, and it's not as overpowering. With plastic, obviously, it doesn't have any fragrance at all. So when you put a plastic shoe tree into your boot, it's not really absorbing, the odor of like sweat, and it's probably not really absorbing moisture either, because plastic's not moisture absorbing at all. So really, the only thing a plastic shoe tree is going to do is hold the shape of the boot, but it's not going to really help as far as wicking away moisture.
It sounds like there's really no point to get the plastic ones.
I think plastic ones are also just generally a lot cheaper. So if you're like on a really tight budget and you have no other choice, you could get plastic ones. But I think shoe trees generally are not too expensive. I mean, you can get a pair for like $20-ish, I think. And some people even use, I think, newspaper. They just crumple up newspaper and shove them in their boots, which I would probably rather do than use plastic, because at least newspaper has some, moisture absorbing properties to it. So I would avoid plastic for sure and stick to, wooden ones if you can.
Gotcha. And you were mentioning that both of ours were actually size medium.
Yeah, they're both a size medium. I think that there's a different, brands, slightly different in sizing. Size medium, I think most shoe trees that I've seen online have size like small, medium, large, and extra large maybe. And then yours size?
Well, this is the Yeoman UK size 6, the women's center last. But for reference, my US usual kind of true sizing for women's is about 8.5.
Yeah.
And I'm usually like a size medium for women's stuff anyways.
And these are Viberg UK size 8, so this is men's. I don't know the correlation with that, but it's at least 2 sizes higher. These fit in both boots. Obviously, it's a lot tighter in this boot. If you weren't trying to stretch them out and they already fit perfectly, I would say it's probably better for you to go to a size small.
I could definitely fit a size small in this one. I'm just choosing to stretch it out with a size medium.
Yeah. And then even with me, I mean, I don't put mine all the way in there because I don't want to stretch out too much. So I theoretically could probably put a size small in here if I wanted it to be tight in there. But I think the medium works well for my purpose with them. And then I also have like Merriman Chelsea boots as well that I put these all the way into because I want them stretched out a little bit more. They are a bit snug. So it really just depends on the boot and what you're trying to do with it. If you have a boot that's tighter and you want to stretch it out, you might want to put it all the way in there. If you have a boot that fits you well and you're just trying to keep the structure and then, wick away some moisture, maybe you don't want it to be too tight in your boot.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So what would you be looking for when you're buying shoe trees? Like what makes for a good shoe tree?
I think one of the main things is pretty simple. Just make sure that the wood is not chipped or cracked or splintered or anything. Because obviously if it's got splinters in it, the splinters could be transferred into the leather when you put it in your boot, and then those splinters could get stuck in your foot.
This one looks pretty good, at least mine does. How about yours?
Yeah, I think mine's good. It looks like there might be a little crack here, which if it keeps splitting, it could kind of chip off at some point. And
do you just sand it down then afterwards?
Yeah, you could sand it down if it's not too big, as long as it's not changing the shape of the tree itself. But obviously, if there's a crack in it, you don't want that. It could be a sharp piece that's missing out of the tree. You don't want that kind of cutting into the leather when you're putting it in and out, because eventually it could scratch through and maybe make a hole in your leather. So just make sure when you get your shoe trees that they're completely smooth all over the place on them. There's no, chips that are sticking out or anything, and there's no like large cracks that could, give way over time. I think those are the main things to look for when you have a shoe tree.
Gotcha. How do you take care of them? Do you just stuff them in a box or something, or
in a boot? Yeah. Stuff them in your boots when you're not wearing them. I mean, it's wood, so it's not like you have to do a whole lot to take care of it. If you're not using them, you can just put them in a closet or something.
You can probably use this as like a fragrance or something for your closet.
Yeah, you can do that too. But yeah, I mean, the only thing to really keep them in good condition, like I said, you can sand them down every now and then to make sure they stay fragrant. I don't know if people ever like wax them or anything. I probably wouldn't wax them because they're going in your shoes, and then that wax would go to your shoes. So I think shoe trees are pretty easy to maintain. You just don't throw them around or break them, or make sure you're soaking them in water or anything. Really
do not abuse your shoe trees. Don't be weird.
Put them in your boots. That's really all you need to do.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So we're both obviously using our shoe trees inside of our boots, but I know there are boot trees too.
Yeah.
What's the difference between the two?
Boot trees, I think, are pretty similar to a shoe tree. Obviously, we are using shoe trees. I think the main difference is that a boot tree has an extra piece of wood that comes up into the shaft of the boot. So instead of it ending here, this wood would basically go all the way up here as well. And I think the stated benefits like add structure to the shaft as well. I think it's kind of gimmicky though, because they do charge a lot more for boot trees because it's more wood. And really the whole point of a shoe tree is to keep the structure of the boot, like it's to keep it tight when you're not wearing it so it doesn't want to, bend over time and do that. Whereas like a boot tree, it's gonna come up in here, but there's not really structure in the shaft of the boot anyway. So you don't need wood in here doing anything, right? Like this is not changing. I've never had a boot tree in here and the shaft looks fine, right? It's not bending or doing anything weird. So I think it's more of a gimmick than anything, just to get people like, oh, it's a boot tree. You should have a boot tree for your boots, without really knowing like what the point of it is. And I don't think it's necessary. I think it's just kind of a waste of money. So if you're buying, trees for your boots, I would say stick to shoe trees. And make sure that you're getting wooden ones, and I guess probably cedar. I would try to avoid plastic ones, and then also, longer ones that are more expensive just for the sake of like selling to people.
One thing I also noticed that we didn't mention earlier is that, at least for my shoe trees, they come up pretty high on the shaft too. So like mine, like they actually come up halfway.
Yeah, mine basically, they come up and they feel like kind of the cup of the heel here, the natural curve of the heel. So you really don't need, to have to worry about the structure.
The structure is already provided here and in all the right areas.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's a good point, that having a boot tree is really not necessary for that reason too, because the back of the boot is already covered by this part here.
Well, I think that just about covers it. Did we miss anything?
I don't think so, but if you guys think we did miss anything, just let us know in the comments, or if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out and we'll try to answer them.
Yeah. Well, subscribe if you want, and we will be back with more boot review videos, perhaps?
Yeah, boot videos of some kind coming up.
Or maybe some secretive non-boot review videos. We shall see. All right, stay tuned.
Thanks, guys.
Bye guys.